So, good afternoon and welcome to this next installment in our weekly Wednesday webinar session. This week, we're going to change gear and jump into security operations and how a combination of XDR, AI, and purple teaming might be the answer. But as always, in this game, we need to be very wary of things that are promised to be the silver bullet. I will call out that we're going to have some audience participation in the form of polls throughout the webinar today. And we also have a Q&A session at the very end. So please ask away, ask your questions on any of the topics and any items we cover or anything left field, if you like. And myself and my colleague Nick, who I'll introduce shortly, will endeavour to answer those to the best of our ability. So, as I said, I'll just introduce our guest today, or our SME today, Nick Brownrigg. Nick is a seasoned professional with 20 plus years of extensive experience in the network and cybersecurity field, working for a range of organizations, including global service providers, carrier service providers, and European leaders in managed security services. Throughout his career, he's honed his skills in sales, engineering, technical team leadership, and senior account management, serving all. Sorry, I've just got an error pop up there that's distracted me. Servicing all elements and of major public and private sector clients, and adding technical expertise in cybersecurity testing, exposure management, and detection and response technologies. So, welcome, Nick, today. So, I'm hoping that you can all still hear me. As these things happen, being a very security conscious organization, our Qualys agent has kicked in to do some patching on my machine to make sure that we're secure. And I've got a warning of low resources that might affect audio quality. So I'm sure my colleagues will let me know if we have an issue there. So moving on to our first part of the slide, just to really introduce our topic today. So why XDR, AI, and purple teaming? As they may seem like slightly odd bedfellows that we're pairing together, but in a world where threats are ever evolving, and we've seen those continuous breaches happening over and over again, our view and my view is that we need to embrace each of them and combining each of them so that we can succeed. And really, that is, the answer. The combination we see is potentially being the answer to unlock a more effective and efficient detection capability. And that's what we're going to try and answer and walk through on today's webinar. So I just want to start before I hand over to Nick with some of the myths that we see that we've picked up from customer engagements around these topics. The first one there, that XDR is just another marketing acronym. We do love acronyms in the cybersecurity world, and I'm sure there's some marketing boards that have made a career from working at how we can create acronyms, and also some Gartner analysts, dare I say, that XDR is just a new spin on endpoint security. There's definitely probably an entire topic on that we could cover. And always, I've implemented an industry-leading detection and response tool or capability or service, and it should detect everything from day one, which is very much a myth. It's going to be working partnership. It's going to be looking to how we improve day one versus day two, looking much further into the future. AI will allow me to reduce the number of security analysts I need. I think we're going to debunk that and look at what reality is. And then lastly, the penetration tests should be conducted by an entirely separate organization and test my SOC. So hopefully they're the things that we're going to cover off. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Nick Brownrigg, and he's going to start us off on this journey.
Thanks, Rich. Cheers. I've already made a first error there by clicking on too fast. Thanks for having me. It's not sunny up here. It's freezing, hence I've got my ghillie on. So unfortunately, I'm not getting that sunshine, you said. In the interest of time, I'm going to kick straight in because anyone that knows Rich and I, if you want to broach a topic of XDR, AI, purple team, that is not going to happen in 45 minutes, but we're going to do our very best job to put an elephant in a matchbox and make that work for you today. So just kicking off with some fundamental basics, as it's about XDR, what is the definition of XDR? Well, obviously Gartner defines it as extended detection and response as a unified security incident detection and response platform that automatically collects and correlates data from multiple proprietary security components. Our extended version of that, no pun intended, from our product definition perspective, from Integrity's perspective, is that XDR collects threat data from siloed security tools across organizations' technology stacks for efficient investigation, threat hunting, and where required, response actions. XDR platforms can collect security telemetry from endpoints and other telemetry sources, essentially. How does XDR work? Well, there's three fundamental phases to XDR. It first looks to ingest volumes of data from things like endpoints, from cloud workloads, identity, and other types of sources. But once it's collected that, it then looks to cross-correlate that information to look for, funnily enough, look for correlations between that may suggest that something is bad and needs looked at. So it's sort of like a telemetry processing machine where it's collecting that information, looking for matches in entity. So what I mean by that is could be a unique entity, could be a user or a host or an IP address potentially. So it looks to join correlation between those types of information feeds, where it then looks to help to prioritize, the other thing to say there is obviously it's using its own, the platforms are using their own AI machine learning type algorithms to help then suggest and recommend on prioritization for analysts to then focus their efforts on. And what I mean by prioritization is helping to draw your attention to what it believes to be critical, what it believes to be high or medium and low, and what have you. So ultimately, it's about that sort of prioritization, giving some operational efficiency back to users. So we know what XDR is. They all do the same thing, right? And I think it's you just buy one off the shelf and we put it in and that's the problem solved. It's not quite as straightforward as that, unfortunately, unsurprisingly, unsurprised to hear that. There are some considerations that we would like you to know and to take into account when potentially looking to adopt an XDR platform play a solution. The first consideration around which XDR is right for you as an organization is the idea of open XDR versus native XDR. Open, as the name would suggest, is a product which is XDR platforms which would use third-party integrations to collect telemetry and respond to threats. A good fit for organizations that want to leverage existing security investments and tools. In other words, something that's a vendor that is friendly and open to working with other products through API integrations and potentially or marketplace type plugin, something that's got a pre-canned plugin that can help take that telemetry, normalize it, and process that to a point of giving an analyst meaningful decisions to make, essentially. Key to that is investment in that space as well. API investment, marketplace development investment, in terms of how they're portioning their spend towards that XDR to their XDR platform. That is key to an open XDR product as well. And I'll come on to some examples of those in the up and coming slides. Invertly, you have native XDR platforms, aka closed type vendors. Now, the idea behind a native XDR play is that they would potentially look to achieve their objectives within their own ecosystem, essentially. And as I said, to ultimately call out a couple of examples of suggested ones in that area, probably Palo Alto's and Microsoft Defender XDR type platforms could be considered more native type technologies. Is that a bad decision? No, absolutely not. These are market leaders in their space and know what they're doing. But it's just that you need to consider when adopting that type of platform, potential repercussions if you may be needing to unpick that type of approach from your organization. You could end up in a situation of vendor lock, and maybe you may end up with what looks to be potentially good pricing initially, only to be hit with expensive renewal costs in the longer term. There's no wrong answer, but it's just to consider the differences between a native and open XDR. And what I would go on to say is that they're not fully closed. It's not completely locked off to all another integrations. It's more about their direction and strategy of ultimately saying we can do this with our own product stacks, and we're going to invest our efforts really in research and development really in our own product. And it may not necessarily be focused towards the API integrations and the marketplace connectors. They can take in some feeds, but really it's about oneself as their primary objective. To repeat, not wrong or right answer, but just to consider when you're adopting that direction. Second thing to consider is the heritage of the XDR vendors that we're talking about. Why is the heritage or the origins important? I'll come on to that in just a slide, but it's really about where you are, where you're like trying to get to in your medium and long term, what the shape and size of your organization is. But it's just important to keep in mind the backgrounds of the types of products on the marketplace today. These are example vendors that it's not exhaustive. These aren't just the only XDR or related XDR type products on the market. These happen to be ones that we provide managed services to. Hence why we're talking about these ones in today's session. But the origins of these come from three different backgrounds: from endpoint, from network, and more of a log analytics type focus. If we just talk about the two dimensions of that, calling out Sentinel-1, for example. Sentinel-1 has been a market-leading endpoint protection, endpoint detection platform for quite some time, but it's invested obviously significantly now to being a real well-rounded XDR player. As is CrowdStrike, as is Microsoft Defender platform, they've made significant inroads to now being a market-leading XDR player. Sentinel-1 and CrowdStrike been more open as XDR vendors. Microsoft Defender been a little bit more closed. So on one hand, you've got the heritage of coming from the endpoint security, endpoint background. On the right-hand side, you've got things coming more from a log analytics type background. Rapid7, for example, could have been considered more SIEM-esque type platform, more of a log analytic type thing. But what Rapid7 does, it has a whole plethora of marketplace connectors, which it uses to ingest from different technologies that customers may have adopted in their environment. So the idea is it will bring those through their connector to help normalize and parse that, match that information to their use cases, their threat detection use cases, which would trigger alerts at the other end of that. So they're sort of just at either end of there. And then obviously you've got your more platform plays like your dark traces, which are born out of more network detection and response, but do pull in other feeds now to help enrich them. I wouldn't actually classify, oddly, dark traces as open or closed. I think it sits somewhere in between open and native, which sort of throws my initial position. I start to contradict myself there, but it is more platform player led and does have those some integrations to help enrich it, but it will play more as a platform solution. So they're two key considerations, right? Why is that? So those three areas, endpoint, network, and log, are what we traditionally knew 10 years ago as the Gartner SOC visibility triad, which was the idea that you need, in order to have maximum visibility of your organization, you should have visibility on your endpoints, visibility on your network, and visibility on your logs. Okay, but the threat landscape has evolved significantly. We're now faced with an additional two component dimensions to what was once a triad, in the sense that we're now having to focus on identity, and we're now having to focus on on cloud as well. And so this is now hot off the press. Rich and I have just launched and trademarked the SOC detection quintet. We take royalties in cash for anyone that wants to use that particular trademark going forward. But the key to this is that products have had to evolve. You can't just be an EPP and EDR platform and claim to be XDR. You've got to be able to address these other two significant dimensions of the threat landscape now. And that's what the race is really about, in terms of to achieve and be able to be a proper pure play XDR vendor. So another sort of consideration around when we're selecting those types of technologies and where we want to is based on our business. Okay, so which XDR is right for you or right for us? Well, the great old cybersecurity answer of, well, it depends, which is quite a common used response to questions in this area. But what I mean by that is it depends on many factors. It depends on what your organization looks like. It depends on where you are in terms of your maturity, what budget you have available, any regulatory requirements you may have, or potentially regulatory requirements can often lead to log collection, need to collect data for a long period of time, maybe 12 months, maybe even 18 months. I've seen 3 years in some instances as well, whereby the drives a need to not just log, but actually be able to get access and search those logs quickly. And that's a difference between just dropping stuff into a cold storage and ability to actually make it searchable, indexable and searchable. So you need to consider about whether you've got regulatory requirements as well. Customization requirements are quite important as well, because you may have proprietary applications to your business. You may have your own crown jewels that you've built yourself and may have need to investigate those types of applications and pull information out of those to help identify if adversaries are trying to focus on your crown jewels, proprietary crown jewels, essentially. So when we think about those types of considerations and heritage, it's potentially that you are a traditional. Sorry, if we think about either ends of the scale of that, potential that you are an early maturity adoption at that sort of phase. You may have a traditional architecture. You may have an on-prem data center. You may have a bit of cloud, but what I would call servers in cloud, a traditional sort of cloud adoption. And you may just be standard end user compute, in which case maybe coming at it from the traditional players, the EPP, EDR vendors may well be the right fit for you in terms of that initial adoption, and you could then look to mature with those into network detection response, cloud detection response. Sorry, the acronyms there: network detection response, NDR, CDR, cloud detection response, IDR, identity detection response. You could then look to mature across from left to right. On the flip side, you may be a more complex, more dynamic organization with what I would call maybe more complex cloud capabilities. Maybe you're containerless, just a more sophisticated adoption of cloud technologies. It may be that you have those compliance requirements, in which case potentially you maybe need to be considering a best of breed solution. Best of breed solutions in each of those places. So a dedicated team that is expertise is parsing information and then bringing those into an MDR type service capability. There isn't a wrong or right answer. And I may hear people at the other end of this screaming, but my XDR platform is capable of seeing capabilities. CrowdStrike, Sentinel-1, they do seem. Microsoft Defender XDR doesn't, but Sentinel does. All of those things are true. But what we're seeing is that in terms of maturity, is the customizability of the SIEM capabilities are still advancing. And do I see in the future these types of technologies been at such a place that they start to, the Sentinel-1, a CrowdStrike's SIEM capability, start to dislodge the once market leaders of the Splunks and what have you? Absolutely, yes. I do believe that to be the direction of where we're heading. I think that right now they are still maturing and growing in their sophistication in terms of SIEM capabilities. So these are just the things that we need to consider about how we select the right products for leading forward with. Okay. So that leads me to there's a little insight in opening the door to where we're going next with this session. So I've selected the right. We've consulted, we've worked together, we selected the right XDR vendor. It was like the right XDR vendor. I thought I said AI then. Most of these market leading products will have XDR, AI capabilities within them. So the poll question number one to you today would be, would you trust AI to take full responsibility for response and containment in your organization? Yes, we love robots. We can all put our feet up. No, human brain power is still required, or maybe some tasks, but not all. Okay. And while we're not going to wait for those results to come in just now, we'll talk about the findings for that at the end of the session. I'm going to sort of just transition from selecting XDR to the AI, the world of AI. As I said, these market leading XDR platforms, or should I say, market leading platforms, have invested in significantly in AI within their technologies, and their stats are in clearly. The self-proclaimed stats are here for us to all see. The sources for these, as you can see, are their own websites. I haven't done this analytics myself. I'm pulling this down from their own sources, and I think that the key question and answer here is that, is AI adding efficiency to our SecOps functions when we select XDR products with AI involved? Answer is categorically yes. We can say that because we're seeing that at Integrity within our own managed services where we're using SOAR and AI too. But I think that just to pick out a couple of stats from here, I like the first row of statistics for this. And the one that draws my attention most on here is the Microsoft Copilot, bottom left, 22% improvement across SecOps tasks. And I think we always take results with a bit of pinch of salt. I think statistics, it's fair to say. This one feels about right for us, because if I was saying operationally what it's achieved for us, I would say 20 to 30% efficiency for our organization. So it feels on the money in terms of reality for us. Other statistics I quite like here Charlotte AI, top left, 75% faster answers to your questions about your environment. I love that, because as a person that's rubbish at syntax, nearly swore on a webinar, which you can never go back from, I love that, because we can search something in human language and it can give us sensible answers back, as opposed to having to worry about commas and all the things in the right order. I find that highly frustrating.
Nick, sorry to break the stride. I just thought I'd just chime in there. I think actually looking at these, something that's very interesting is the types of stats that they are. Our poll question, which we are going to get onto at the very end, but I can see somebody has said, yes, long live the robots. So there's somebody that's plowing in with the response capabilities, but none of the stats. And this really kind of talks to how how AI solutions are being embedded and what their function really is. We sort of hype and silver bullet of being able to completely automate absolutely everything. But what are they really automating? What's really being delivered? And you can see it from these questions. It is augmentation. It is faster querying, helping with the query, helping with the threat hunt overall. I know you're going to come on to some bits there, but looking at these stats, I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, I like the braveness of the long live the robots. Definitely a fan of that one. As I say, I'm looking forward to putting my feet up on a beach somewhere when we let the robots take over. So, but yeah, as you say, Rich, we're seeing this. This isn't necessarily new to us. We saw the signs of what is AI ultimately delivering? As I say, operational efficiency, and we saw the first iteration of this through SOAR. We've been using SOAR within our managed services for quite some time, and it has brought operational efficiency for us. Q 2.0, the AI piece, it's probably adding another element of operational efficiency on top of that. And you can see here, this is actually from our SOAR platform. It's a demo data, of course, but helps to get across the point here is that what SOAR was doing for us is it was grouping together alerts from multiple different technologies. And you can see within the screenshot there, it says tab 1 and 2, malware detection, and then there's a GCP new service account created. These are 2 individual alerts. SOAR was matching those alerts together into one incident. It was then hitting playbooks and enriching that incident for us, presenting analysts with meaningful decisions to make. Now, where AI has came into it is it's given us that executive summary approach of this case may require attention, and here's why it is and what actually happened during this incident. So the alert has been grouped together. The 2 alerts have been grouped together. AI has obviously summarized this in a nice, presentable way to help point us towards the next steps that we should take. Investigate the client update.exe process, investigate the process ID, investigate the IP and Mike Ross's PC. I hope Mike isn't on here today, but because you're in big trouble, Mike. But in this instance, it's given us good guidance towards what we need to be able to go and do. Is that taken? The question there that would be asked is, well, if you're doing that integrity, why don't we just do that? That makes that it seems like this is an easy life for you guys. Well, not really. Firstly, as a shared service, we support many customers. But secondly, this is helping analysts to see straight. It's helping avoid that alert fatigue, helping present that type of summary. The manual effort really comes in when we start to now investigate these types of processes, investigate malicious hashes, investigate IP addresses, where we start to look at other maybe sandbox analysis, virus total, it just sort of IP reputational exploration. But that ability to think more freely is what SOAR in AI is helping us to do, as opposed to being exhausted by the time you've correlated this information, then going on to make perform your analysis of the alert itself.
Yeah, so definitely turbocharging that security analysis capability, and what it is enabling us to do, although it's not allowing us to hand off all elements, just meaning that we can do more faster as a service provider. And there's also probably a point there, Nick, about actually where is the right place to provide the augmented AI analyst, and that definitely comes into the open slash versus native XDR piece you were talking about earlier, particularly if there's multiple platforms in play, multiple opinions, but actually, really looking at how can you unify all of that and get one view across all, which I think is actually going to be one of the challenges around the sort of embedding AI. One thing we haven't touched upon here is sort of the AI that's always been around. I say always been around. It's always been around in terms of EDRs, NDRs, and other DR-based platforms of doing the machine learning, artificial intelligence on the detection side. But obviously, really, that's kind of seen as a standard. The bog standard entry point is to have that, but obviously providing the AI augmentation over the top is really what we're talking about here, and in a lot of cases, just some challenges, I guess, as well, Nick, around that, and something that our analysts need to work through is accuracy. So although it's then providing our analysts with the clues and to be able to react fast, cover more, really it's a starting point. It's just giving you that helping hand to start off where she'd be looking. And what our guys have been well versed in is looking at the accuracy and just checking what's actually there, because as great as AI is and you can train it on all of your data, quite often it misses context that is being picked up. And you could say, maybe we haven't got enough of the context in previous tickets or knowledge bases that might have been through conversations, but there is a difference between the human and the AI at the moment, at the very least.
Yeah.
So I think that just
Okay.
comes on to our, talk about SOAR and bringing us on to our sort of next poll question that we're just going to launch. And yes, it's targeted at probably those that have a SOAR platform in place, but there's obviously an option for those that don't. And Ria was asking, are you getting value from your SOAR platform? It's a bit of a pointed question because it's yet another silver bullet that's been promised to remove all the overhead on analysts completely, remove the need for level one analysts. But I think our experience across the industry, no matter how much and user friendly and easy to use, they are extremely difficult to actually really realize that full value. So very curious to see what our audience has experienced from their implementations where they have them. So that kind of brings us on just a last bit to kind of sort of if I can get that to move on one slide. You might need to take control there, Nick, and move us on to the next slide. And yeah, I think you've covered some of this, but really asking the question, AI versus SOAR, is AI kind of the emperor's new clothes in terms of something we've always had in SOAR and it just being reinvented? And I'd say that's very much true. The difference being in SOAR platforms, it's very static, it's very manual. You need a team of engineers that are going to understand not just security, but also Python coding, really, because although it's no code, it's low code, it's quite often actually code that you need to implement to then understand the threat, to build out the paths, and then you can have unique nuances. Whereas now going into bringing AI, we're kind of automating that entire SOAR process. So although it's not there entirely yet, but what I definitely see over the short to long term, probably actually, sorry, short to long term, medium to long term is what I'm supposed to say, but potentially in the short, that we'll see those two converging and it just being a security feature where we're taking an alert in, the AI platform can just use its knowledge and the large language model capability it has to understand that alert and then providing the triage activity, which is what we're doing right now, but even going those steps further so we can all be as brave as that sole person that said, long live the robots. So that's, and we need to move swiftly on. That's AI. So I just wanted to start on to really look at our last piece, purple teaming, and really security testing. And I thought I'd just start with, what is purple teaming? And we can kind of look at that along a scale of our security operations and security capability, starting from the one end, which is the red end, going all the way through to the blue end. And obviously, red being those offensive security people and activities that are proactive in nature, so proactively going out, so being the attackers, identifying those gaps and blind spots. I won't spend too long on this because I'm sure most people are aware of what red teaming is, but it's really testing the effectiveness of defensive controls and how secure the configuration is. And then on the other side of the house, we have our blue team. And it's not just the blue team, it's the blue team processes as well, but these are the defenders of our network, responsible for detection and response, understanding behaviors and TTPs of the attackers, and then really working to improve the capabilities of the SOC and overall. And then sitting in the middle, we have very much our purple team. Now, purple team is not going to be a set of people that are purple teamers. And I would say there is such a thing as a purple team, but actually there's probably more elements. I say there's definitely more elements to what a purple team process really needs to look at overall. And really it's about collaborating between and being the glue between the blue and red teams. Although quite often run by red teamers that have experience on both sides. It's important that they have experience on both sides of the house so they can provide the real value and training, because that's what it's really about. It's upskilling the blue team so we can build on the skill that they have in place right now, but also upskilling the experience of the blue team. So taking that red team perspective, carrying out, and I'm going to touch upon that in a bit more detail in a second, but really pitting them against a real world situation and tactics, techniques. Because I would say that there's a vast majority of analysts, particularly analysts that work in a dedicated SOC, and what I mean by dedicated SOC is an internal SOC where they haven't got a view across multiple environments. They will probably have never faced a full threat that has breached the perimeter, even if we don't have one these days, and laterally moved and exfiltrated data. And it's I hope and thankfully, It'll be rare for most analysts to get to that level, but it's important they train. And it's also there to validate the threat detection capability. I'll come on to that in a second. So we've ended at poll 2, we're on to poll 3. And it's just a very pointed question here. Have you carried out a purple team exercise? So yes, it's a continuous process that we validate our security. Yes, but we do it ad hoc. No, we carry out pen testing and provide the results to our SOC. Or more worryingly, no, I need a pen test. If you're clicking that one, then somebody from Integrity will definitely reach out to you straight afterwards. Um, uh, if we get those details. So if we launch that poll, please answer those as we go. So just moving on to just to go a little bit deeper on purple teaming. If I can get that, you might need to. Oh, there we go. Purple team approaches, and we can kind of split those down because it's not just go and run a purple team exercise, but actually we can split the approaches down into 2 ways. One, we need to look at making sure that we're continuously validating our security controls and our detect, particularly when we come to the topic we're on, which is really security operations, and whether it's applying to XDR, whether it's applying to open XDR and SIEM platforms, we must understand what is our coverage. Is it fit for purpose? Do we have gaps? Are we detecting what we think that we're detecting? And we can do that in 1 or 2 ways. Well, actually, in multiple ways, but really to do that continuously, you need to look at something like pen testing as a service and make sure that that is integrated into your operation. Or we look at a breach and attack simulation tool that can run these on an iterative process, identify those gaps, and provide the answers there. And just to add a little more flavor on there, when we're talking about validation, it's validating, do our detection rules, if we're talking about SIEM, because it's a nice and easy one to talk about, are detection rules working? Are they correct? Do we have the right thresholds? Are we looking at the right things? But actually also what we need to look at is, do we have the logs and events coming in that we expect? Far too many times there'll be an issue or incident, and actually the reason why is because we're not collecting logs of an entirely new area of the environment that's been stood up. So we need to be able to identify those. But it's also looking at how do we react to those? What is the process? And how do we refine those? And then lastly, we can look at those more point in time things. So doing threat scenario-based workshops, which is really, I think, something that is missed out quite often. So that, taking the blue team, we do it quite often at the senior level of what would you do if the house was on fire, but actually looking at the blue team, walking them through some of those scenarios, and then also doing a full purple team engagement overall. So just as I'm aware that time is ticking on and we want to get into the QA, just a last piece here. How can Integrity 360 help? Well, talking about the early part that Nick referred to, so how can we help and integrate those XDR solutions and into AI solutions? And I'll come on to the purple teaming in a second. Obviously, we can provide our MDR services that can provide that technology, provide that capability overall, and bring XDR to life and cover as much as possible. And then also provide a full managed detection response, which is really enabling organizations to have that open vendor XDR framework where you can pick and choose the vendors that you require or get the value out of the investment that you've already made and then take advantage of an XDR type of capability overall. And also, we can help you join up the complete picture. So if we look at, and this should be our aim overall, and I think we can do an entire webinar on just looking at the life cycle overall. But we should be aiming to make sure we have a completely joined up end-to-end security operations process. So making sure that we have the threat awareness that's guiding us, that we're doing our exposure management, that's informing where we're vulnerable, but also where we have gaps in our detection and response. Also, carrying out the detection and response piece is obvious, and then importantly, making sure that we're doing the security validation. So regardless of where you're getting your security operations from, whether you're doing it in-house, it's important and essential that we have each one of these elements delivered and they're joined up, and one is informing the other, and we've got that continuous wheel going through. So we have ended. Oh, sorry, just some jump there on the wrong slide. So summary and key takeaways. And sorry, I'm rushing. We are moving at a bit of pace now. But XDR, provides, as Nick talked through, provides that consolidated threat visibility of what we've named the SOC detection quintet. Nick was obviously joking about the trademark, so feel free to use that until we do. It's hassle-free detections and investigation. So, providing a lot of that out-of-the-box capability, bringing the operational efficiency and the end-to-end orchestration and response. AI, just operational efficiency again. That's where we utilize it. But it's important. It's not a silver bullet, but could, probably will be the replacement of the augmentation for SOAR. Still challenged around accuracy. And then lastly, purple teaming, continuous validation. We need to make sure that we have some capability to make sure what we're doing is correct and what we're doing is effective. And then lastly, making sure we're using that to upskill our analysts. And actually, that's one of the things that's probably very important. It's not just upskilling the analysts, but I think it's also keeping them enthused, keeping them in the role that they are being moved forward and progressed. So the very last poll question, and it's a little bit of a selfish one, but on these topics, we've touched surface, we've linked them together, but we can obviously go a hell of a lot deeper. So which ones of those topics would you like to see, or something completely different? Please add it to the chat. So I'm going to leave that open, and we're going to dive into the Q&A session. So if I can just pull up the Q&A questions. 2 seconds. And do we have some Q&A questions? So we have 3 questions in, but please, if there are any more questions or any of the topics or anything you want to ask Nick and myself, please do ask. So the first question, Nick, I'm going to throw this one straight at you. Which is better, open or closed XDR?
Open. I'm supposed to sit on the fence, but open.
I'm going to push you to explain your answer there. And
vendor. I don't like it. I wouldn't like the idea of vendor lock. I think that it gives an unpredictable price, both in terms of renewal, but also unpredictable in terms of unpicking cost to unpick as well and replace a complete solution end to end. I think is the quickest answer I can give to that. Versus open, you could unpick a component of that with lighter touch if required.
Yeah, I actually expected you to give the classic depends answer. But you put a stake in the ground there. I would agree. There's definitely complexities to consider with open, but it's interesting you sort of talk about vendor lock-in, seeing it more discussed. Gartner being quite the advocate of being careful about MDR services and looking at where proprietary tech might fit the lower end of the market, the SME area. But anything beyond that, looking at actually probably want to bring your technology, have that technology choice so that you can own it and not be locked in and held to ransom or held to mercy with a vendor. So there's definitely parts there.
To be fair to Microsoft as well, though, in Microsoft Defender XDR considered more closed, but clearly it's got the Sentinel piece to the jigsaw puzzle, which can come together to create this best of both worlds, helping to address I guess mid-market, but also then able to address on scale enterprise end as well. So I think that, to be fair, there's you see products that help to tick those boxes as well.
Okay, well, actually, there's a question in that aligns to that, so I'll jump to that one now. And the question is Sentinel essential for Defender XDR? So I think you talked about that.
No. Yeah.
So I think you talked about the integration of it, and you kind of probably half answered it there. But I probably even asked the question, or pose that question in 2 other ways, or is it essential? But also, is Defender XDR on its own enough?
Yeah. I think it depends. You'd be surprised to know. No, I think Defender XDR, I think it's absolute. There's no getting away from it. It's a fast horse running. It's very, very, by independent measures, is able to deliver excellent levels of coverage and visibility across identity, cloud apps, purview data. Try to think of the other modules underneath of Defender XDR, but I think it gives a hell of a good piece of coverage. Just point to note, Defender XDR is part of an E5 subscription. That's going to get you your maturity. So it comes at a price, but will give you excellent maturity. I think where Microsoft Sentinel comes to play is where you may have more need to search, firstly, to store logs for a long period of time, potentially be able to investigate, customize detections and things like that. I think it's going to take you to another level, but absolutely think that Defender XDR on its own, in most instances that don't have regulatory requirements for login, is an excellent place to be, which hurts.
Actually, I'm gonna just jump in there and pick your knowledge on Microsoft licensing,
Of course.
and so I hope it's on point. And you sort of mentioned that it's part of the E5, which
Yeah.
E5 covers a fair few security elements, of which that's one of them. Can you get it separately? Or is it really just applicable if you get E5, you've got Defender XDR and use it, or are there? I know Defender used to have Defender Plan 2 to buy Defender on its own as an endpoint solution, but is the
Yeah.
XDR so bundled up into it that it's just it's just
So,
an E5 license?
so I don't know the answer to the
Do you know what?
Defender.
Don't know
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
an acceptable
Yeah.
answer here.
Yeah.
But
What I would say,
one to
important.
think about and probably follow up
Yeah.
on.
Mm.
We can provide that as follow up. So just sorry, I'll just in the interest of time. There's one more question, and it was we have multiple of these vendors. What way should I go? And now I don't know exactly which bit that was asked in, but I'd hazard a guess it was when looking at, well, I suppose there's probably only one point you're talking about the specific vendors. Um, uh, so, um, yeah, I'd probably look at endpoint network and log analytics vendors. So if someone's got those different vendors and you're talking about endpoint, on an endpoint path, going on a network path, or going on a log
Mm.
analytics path for consolidation, what would you do?
You're asking me that?
I
Oh, you answer that.
am asking you that, yes. There isn't
That's a big
anybody else on here,
question.
I'm afraid.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think we need to, you got two options there. You bring them into an overarching managed text response type service from best of breed products, or if there are potentially budget considerations, consolidation objectives within your business, maybe you look to ramp up capabilities within one of those players. And maybe even one, hypothetically speaking, is network detection and response type products going to give you what you need? Maybe you've moved on in your organization, maybe you're much more mature, maybe you're less traditional now, and you've now outgrown this traditional network detection response type capability. So I think, again, unfortunately, it does depend. I think you need to consider various different aspects. But if you were keeping everything, I would say you go, and there's no reason to trigger a change. I'll probably put them together into a SOAR type component or a managed detection response service, which groups together alerts from different technologies.
Okay. Excellent. Do you know, we are hard on time, but we have one more question that in here, which is actually quite a taxing question. So I'm going to ask it to you, but this is probably one we're going to, and it's Neil Wars asked the question, and we're wanting to come
Why
back
are
because
you
it's very
asking the questions and
specific.
not me? I think you
Um,
should answer a couple.
this is the way it goes when you're the host, Nick. It's all in levels of seniority. Are you able to assess a Microsoft Power Page security setup that is getting bogus Azure B2C account set up, getting passed around MFA, capture, and WAF? So that is, yeah, that's probably something we would need to
Yeah,
unpack in a bit more detail.
yeah.
I would say that this is the realms of our Microsoft security experts. So I think we're going to come back to you on that one and bring the likes of Pete Inchley that can really guide you on Azure B2C setup, and also some of our team from our Microsoft security practice that can definitely help. So unless Nick, you want to jump in and try and answer that one,
I was
I
going to
think
say
it's
the
probably
same, Rich.
one that
Look,
we
however,
bring the real expertise in that area to bear in this instance.
we'll bring our centre of excellence, Microsoft Centre of Excellence in absolutely to get them to answer that question. And just quickly, Richard, the Microsoft piece, a little tip is what I always use for Microsoft is to keep up to date. The reason I say I don't know is because it's always moving. Is I always use m365maps.com whenever I'm having conversations around Microsoft. So hence they don't know at the time, but that's what I would use for reference. Good little hint and tip if you're on a Microsoft conversation.
There we go. And I think we will end it on that. M365 Maps is Nick's best friend. So I thank you all very much for joining our weekly Wednesday webinar today, where we dive into security operations and answering that question and looking at that hypothesis that is XDR, AI, and purple teaming key criteria and key consideration for improving our security operations capability. And I think it is. I think, as we touched upon in the summary and key takeaways, and in most of Nick's answers, it all depends. So we are going to leave it there. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you at the next weekly Wednesday webinar. Thank you.